All right, it's 12:03 now, so let's kick it off. The beeps have slowed down, and we're here to talk about XchangeCore in detail. Last call, we took a look at the new incarnation of what on the civilian side was usage, and on the military side was called Keystone. And this reincarnation, let's call it, of those different tools in a format of new web service data orchestration is what our focus is on today. And if we take a look at our topics, we're going to start out with introductions around the country. Why don't we just see who's online from out on the West Coast? We do this because we're building a community here of people who join together to not only exchange information, but help each other exchange information. So who do we have on the line from out on the West Coast, or west of the Rockies, let's say?
Good morning, Jim. Jeff Hahn, Boyd Gaming.
Hello, Jeff. Good to hear from you.
John Luke Blair from the USGS, Menlo Park.
Oh, excellent.
Lieutenant Colonel Dan Marker, California National Guard.
Okay, well, good to hear from you.
John Black, Washington County Sheriff's Office, Oregon.
Oh, John. Been a while. Good to hear from you. Yeah. All right, how about anybody west of the Mississippi now?
Dan Anderson, Hennepin County Emergency Management in Minnesota.
Oh, Dan. Good to hear from you. And then how about anybody, any place who'd like to introduce themselves? Nobody in the East?
Hi there, this is Lenora Style from GMO.
Oh. Welcome. Glad you could join us today. And anybody else? Oh, East Coast is usually the populated place. But, all right. Well, we always have people who sit in the background just to listen, and that's just fine because it's all part of the getting to know you process. So today we're going to take a look at first the XchangeCore environment. We talked about that last week, but want to remind you all the components that are in XchangeCore. And then how we got to XchangeCore, the pedigree that has brought it up. I mentioned the DHS and DoD components to it. And then we'll take a look at why web service data orchestration really matters, what it does, what it means for you, and then take a look at some of the fundamentals on information sharing, exchange, orchestration, really dive down so that you see what it is that the tools, this set of tools do. Then we'll talk about how to get XchangeCore, and then our always popular open mic session where you can talk about anything. So how about if we get started? Begin taking a look at the XchangeCore environment. There are 5 major components to it that build around XchangeCore itself, and that's the XchangeCore Geospatial Repository, XchangeCore Code, the Community, and the XchangeCore Cloud. And we're going to take a quick look at each one of these right now because each of them has its own session coming up. On August 7th, our next tutorial, we're going to take a look at the Geospatial Repository. A Geospatial Repository, because XchangeCore is standards-based, allows us to touch just about every type of geospatial information. But the actual repository that we've spent some time building some better tools on is ArcGIS Online. So we'll be taking a look at the tools for the Geospatial Repository next week and really looking at the value proposition of XchangeCore for all different types of GIS support in Google Earth, OpenStreetMaps, ArcGIS Online, and ArcGIS and other tools. So that's our next tutorial. Following that, we take a look at the XchangeCore Code open source library. This is on GitHub, and the open source license allows anyone to be able to take the code itself or take the code for all the XchangeCore adapters and begin to build each of those. If I could ask all of you to put your phones on mute, please. And what it provides is the ability for you to get that code and be able to use it as part of your own application development. Of course, the executable license is there, no cost to federal agencies or responder agencies, and that doesn't require you to know anything other than be able to have a copy some software onto your computer, which your IT people will do for you. The next component of the XchangeCore environment is the cloud. And the cloud's made possible by a series of innovations that have developed in using Microsoft SQL Server for the Windows component, the addition of the Linux operating system that has been done entirely by our private sector members of the community, and the development of what are our virtual cores that sit inside of a single core that allow enhanced sharing agreements to take place among agencies so that you can support regionalization in the cloud. And during this session on September 11th, you'll be learning about those organizations that are supporting XchangeCore out on the cloud. And then the next session is on the 25th of September, and there we're going to talk about the XchangeCore Community, how we can all get more involved, and the ways in which we have built-in connectivity from the traditional tutorials like we've had. We have implementation guidance calls that are available for people, the technical support line for installation support, website, blogs, libraries, all that sort of thing. With the key being that XchangeCore is open to everyone. Anybody who has a need to exchange information in the broadly based emergency management community is welcome and encouraged to be part of the XchangeCore community. So that's the environment. And we'll be taking a look at each one of these in more detail. And today, it's the XchangeCore itself. What it is, where it came from, how you use it, and what the value is that you get out of information exchange. So let's begin by taking a look at the pedigree. How did we get here? Well, some of you, at least, who are on the phone have been aware of the UICDS, Unified Incident Command Decision Support Project that's been going on. You see the chronology of activities that have taken place there with lots of development activities, piloting, and then last year's graduation from Department of Homeland Security and the creation of the open source community. Parallel to that for the last couple of years has been the Department of Defense use of UCITS code. Northcom adopted UCITS for information exchange among a number of DoD applications as well as out to civilian applications. And over the last couple of years, that adoption turned into a program, MATADRR, which is the Mission Assurance Threat Assessment and Disaster Response Recovery Program, that has led to the release of Keystone, a version that has grown from UCITS. It has a number of different features in it. Now let's take a look at how each one of these different approaches, civilian and military, and then enhanced, as I mentioned, by the private sector, how they got here. The UCITS mission, for those of you who have been around for a while, has principally been state and local interoperability, an attempt to take all those great applications out there that were designed to serve a fire need or a police need or an on-scene emergency response need or a command center or an operations center need. Great applications, all of which met a specific set of requirements from their users. And by virtue of that, almost by definition of meeting the requirements for one set of users, you can create a silo of information. And we've seen that. It's been written about. And since the 9/11 reports that were highly critical of those silos of information, there has been progress made and an awful lot of attention, UCITS being one of those sources of progress. Goal of UCITS is to cut across those silos, provide a format for sharing information across those different organizations and enabling a two-way exchange that allows information of multiple different types, from checklists to documents and logs, real implementation systems, Excel spreadsheets, delivered in geospatial components on mobile apps, on computers, all the different things that you see and are aware of that don't share information. The structure behind usage was to enable that information sharing in a two-way exchange. MATADRR picked up on that concept and said, all right, well, we've got some different requirements here. First of all, our requirements come out of the military, as well as for two components on the military side. One is managing emergencies, and those exist both in military bases and impacting from civilian problems on the military bases, as well as force protection coming out of the Fort Hood shootings, and the analysis of that is how do we do a better job of protecting our forces. That became a new set of requirements for the usage tools. Portion of that is, in the bottom left-hand corner, the criticality of those edge users. I mean, these are people who carry guns, and they have a parallel function to those who carry a fire hose. How do we push this information out to support those people who are on the front lines of all forms of emergency? The upper right-hand corner, it was certainly built into usage, but becomes very, very important on the military side, is those interagencies, relationships and partners, because you're working inside of the secure military environment, but having to support and be supported by those on the outside. So a new set of requirements. Then finally shared them on both sides, the open standards. Absolute requirement that that information be available in standardized formats, goal being to not invent anything. MATADRR created a set of components that are now present in the XchangeCore that have resulted in bringing together those two disciplines, those two research development and piloting efforts into XchangeCore today. Produces a couple of very significant things. One, security. Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security on DHS side, the software that is XchangeCore now has been taken through the CNA process, certification and accreditation, to operate on secure civilian networks. Same thing happened in DoD. Went through that process, excruciatingly painful at some points, but the code was really quite solid. Now certified to be used on the .mil network. There aren't many tools out there that have that dual set of certifications. And as we learn more when we get to the code sharing, that both of those become very important ways for the enhancements that are going to be made to XchangeCore to then go back through the process of security certification, so that when anybody picks it up, you know that the current executable version of it has been through the security certification, and you can be confident that on your network that there are no vulnerabilities. So that's where it came from. So now let's decide why it matters. Why does exchange matter? And that's an important word that I'd like to focus on, because information sharing has been happening for a long time. If we just even use the definition of it, you'll understand both the value of it and the limitations of it. Because sharing means that I've got something, I'm going to give pieces of it to somebody else, or I'm going to take it and give it to you. It's a one-way motion. I've got it and you're going to get it. Absolutely perfect and critical way to get information from someplace and put it on your common operating picture. Get that information, put it up on a portal to visualize it. All one-way information. Absolutely critical component of being able to have people visualize data from a number of different sources. But it's not the whole story, because there's the other component to it, the exchange, which is the act of giving and taking back and forth. In return, you get something, a reciprocal going back and forth. That's what I need to have real-time operations, real-time support for decision-making. is the human interaction that takes place when you're sitting inside of your command center or EOC, duplicated in technology, where I pass information back and forth, being real-time situational awareness by somebody saying, this is what I'm doing, and hearing what someone else is doing, rather than just the passing of both of those units up to some third entity. Collaboration, absolutely essential, and data fusion. If I'm not having a true exchange of data, I'm never going to be able to pull all the real-time information together and make effective fusion. That distinction is critical because both sharing and exchange are essential. It's the only way you end up with all of the capabilities that are needed in emergency management. Sure, if I had any one of these, I'd be thrilled. But both of them give me the richness and the assurance that we're going to talk about in the upcoming minutes. So think of this, exchange and sharing. Am I giving it up and somebody else and lots of other people are viewing it, or am I actually getting something back that helps improve my own operations? That concept of sharing is one where there's a problem, and organizing the data is really the problem. Somebody was once stated that there are 90,000 layers of geospatial data out there that I can use to help me manage my emergency. That's a big challenge. Dozens of different geospatial formats, hundreds of non-geospatial formats, many, many different standards for both geospatial and non-geospatial data. Some of them available as nice, neat, packaged up web services, but many, many not. So the problem becomes one of organizing data. Lots of it out there. How do I organize it? And how do I answer the question about this place with this problem right here, right now? That doesn't lend itself to going through 90,000 layers of geospatial data. What I have through XchangeCore and the confluence of the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security, and it's running in a crucible of fire in the private sector, is web service data orchestration. It's the answer to organizing your data. And orchestration is the process of bringing two or more things together, applications, software, services, data, you name it. Bring them together in order to do two things, one or the other, but what you're going to see are how we do both of them together. To automate a process so that those 90,000 data layers become the ones I want right now, and to synchronize the data, because you had, in that previous slide with all the lines on it, you had 100 different places where that data was going to go. And if I'm not having the same data at the same time that's being processed and visualized by all those disparate organizations, I'm not having the power of the technology to support the absolutely critical emergency management decisions that have to be made. So web service data orchestration is what XchangeCore adds to information sharing and to information exchange. And it does that by having 5 major components of our web service data orchestration. Their first one is translating web service data formats into a common format. Lots of great web services. Web service is likely to be the vision of the future. Everybody will be a web service someday, but that doesn't mean that data is the same. It simply means that the transfer protocol lets me get at that data. So I need to understand how to get web service enabled data into a common format. Second thing that orchestration does is transform. It transforms the non-web service data formats into a common data format. Most importantly, until the world is all web service, which is years away, we've got to be able to have that transformation format to take non-web service data into formats like that we can deal with. The third thing, once I've got that data, what orchestration does is package it. Package what we've called common operational data into content packages that are going to make it absolutely relevant to the person who wants to consume the data. Let's go back to those 90,000 data layers. Not only do I not want 90,000 data layers, I may only want 3. And not only do I not want 3 data layers, I only want the data in those 3 layers that's right around my problem. We'll look at that in more detail, but relevance is where I end up when I package the common operational data that I've translated and transformed from a number of data sources. The next component is secure agreements. What I have to do is make absolutely certain that the person who's providing data is the one who I think it is, and to assure the consumer of the data are the only ones that I want to get that information. So I want to be able to reliably tell the owner of the data where their data is going, and the consumer of the data where it has come from. It's called being sure that what you're reading is valid. Vetting of information through secure agreements. Part of data orchestration, our ability to deliver the content through XchangeCore to only authorized applications, absolutely a critical component. And then lastly, synchronizing the data in real time, which XchangeCore does by notifying applications anytime there's a change in the data that exists. Notification is prepared for the application, and that assures that we end up with currency of my data and a consistency of the view across all those few, many, dozens, hundreds of different applications that have people sitting in front of them who want to be able to make their decision by looking at that information. And if one's looking at information that is old, and the other's looking at information that is partial, one is looking at information that they can't get to, you're not going to have the quality of decision making that is necessary in our critical business. So web service data orchestration carries out those major components, each of which has specific value. Value coming out of changing those formats to be able to give me the common operational data that I want. Value in the packaging that allows me to get relevant results without having to go out and discover them. The security of the agreement, that's obvious. And the synchronization of the data is something that you do, and those of you who are operating an emergency operations center, it's something you do by getting on the phone or getting on the radio and saying, what's new? Synchronizing the data results in that. So let's take a look at each one of those 5 components. Translate and transform. Web service translation, web service transformation. What we have is data available today. Lots and lots of different sources. Geospatial, non-geospatial, web services, those that are API-based. And on the right-hand side, applications. You see the lines here? You can imagine how more complicated those lines would be if you have more on the right and more on the left. But there's an additional component to this data availability, and that is not everybody on the right can see everything that's available on the left. So I got some solid lines that it transfers, some that the big dots that may or may not make it, some little dots that I'm never going to see that information in my own application. As a result, I have no assurance that across this environment that I've painted here, that everybody's looking at the same information. So what do? XchangeCore sits in the middle. Translation and transformation on the left-hand side. Inside of XchangeCore, I orchestrate, I synchronize, and I secure. All of those applications on the right-hand side, instead of having to create all of those connections, connect once, one connection to XchangeCore to enable the sharing and exchange among all those different sources and services. And what that gets us is that relevant, related data about an incident that's current. It's always available and simultaneously available to everybody because it's translated into my own format of those on the right-hand side. My application is going to be able to not just view it, but take it, process it, change it, improve it, and then best of all, through secure agreements, share it back with other people. Exchange it to be able to go back and forth, improve it, correct it, improve it. That's the essence of what XchangeCore can do in orchestration. Packaging that information is absolutely critical component of it because you got lots of common operational data out there. I need to put it into a package that those of you who have been on our calls for a while know we refer to as the tree of knowledge, because out of that is going to become the essential elements of information. So let's take a look first at common operational data, a review for some of you, for those of you who are new. It's answering a set of questions, and every component that we have is designed to answer these questions. What is it? Where is it? I've got a problem. I've got a geospatial view of the people, the infrastructure, and environment. Who's in charge? What is this command structure, emergency support structure? Who's going to be dealing with this? And who should know? Who has already made an alert? And who has to alert, to be alerted, to know that all the right organizations are involved in response? What's the impact? Obviously, a clear need in order to manage your response. So you have to understand that environment, which means sensors and cameras, getting aerial imagery, running models, getting instantaneous reports in from the field. What's the response? Who are my resources? What procedures are being followed? What tasks are being performed? Need to know that for every one of those agencies that are following the instructions of the one who's in charge. What's happening now? Obviously, an essential component of information. Get that out of situational awareness or off of my common operating picture. It happens with all this in a shift change briefing. There may be statistics involved. Number of different ways that I need that information. And then, of course, what's planned next? In my ICS procedures, my incident action plan, where am I going to allocate resources in the future? Where's my tactical response? And what's the forecast of impacts? How many more people am I going to be sheltering tomorrow than today? These are the key things, and I've been through probably 60 different sets of essential elements of information, a great phrase, buzzword, if you will, that's used in the military and civilian side. And I've yet to find an essential element of information in anybody's list that doesn't fit into these categories. This is the broad way in which, if I gather common operational data in these categories, I can compose it into content packages and deliver essential elements of information. So what we do when we build those contact packages then is narrow the focus to what matters. I have an area where my emergency is happening that lets the geospatial tools refine all the information so that I end up knowing what 3 schools are affected, not the 3,000 schools that are in the state. I'm going to make certain that every application is acting on the same incident-related content. It's going to be current, identical, simultaneous, continuous, and shared by rule. And most importantly, because I always am dealing with space, I can take non-geospatial information, that checklist that's sitting out there, or somebody's report that they've written, and I can associate it with the incident, associate it with a known space, and thus turn that non-geospatial information into something that is geospatial, can be seen on your common operating picture, and can be viewed by other people. So the value then, in a pictorial way, is shown here. Left-hand side, every facility in the state of California. On the right-hand side, a fault line that has just ruptured with the critical information that I care about exposed out of all that data. And it happens in a process. Incident is created in some other application and provided to XchangeCore. That incident has a location. The consuming models that are getting that information through XchangeCore are able to select the appropriate data, put it back into XchangeCore, and allow every other application to then know that it's those on the right-hand side that I care about, not all those on the left-hand side that I might know about. And the result is that I have pointed my decision makers to the problem that they need to address, and know that every decision maker is seeing that same information. How's that happen in XchangeCore? Well, each one of those major common operating picture content that we have over there on the left-hand side has a web service associated with it. We keep talking about web services. Well, XchangeCore is built out of them. So we are part of the future. And every one of those components has a responsibility to address the information needs of those on the left-hand side. And we're going to take a look at those. I'm going to dive down a little bit technical, but not much, just so that you say when we're looking at a web service, there are two things I want to point out in each one of these. First of all, the standard. Everything is driven by a standard. Nobody sat down and invented anything and said, hey, this is cool. Here we say the National Information Exchange Model 2.0 tells me that for an incident, I want to have this set of required data, this set of optional data. The Incident Management Web Service in XchangeCore manages that information for you. And in doing so, that tree of knowledge that I mentioned before, the root trunk of that tree of knowledge becomes that incident information. Next, what do I want to know next? Where is it? We heard that question asked before. All the different standard and references that you see up at the top there. The key data is the information about that particular set of information, a layer it's called in GIS. I want to be able to know it, and I'm going to build a relationship between the incident and geospatial on my tree of knowledge to be able to carry that information forward and have everybody have it available to them. Next component, who's in charge? My incident command or organizational structure service allows me, again, following the National Information Exchange Model as the overview of this, to gather up the organization, the type of organization, the role and position, the person in charge of what incident, staff name, all those components that are absolutely essential. And some application out there is managing that for you. When you dispatch a police officer, you're gathering that information. What's that do? Well, it helps answer that question of who's in charge and becomes part of the tree of knowledge. The alert, coming out of the Common Alerting Protocol. What I have are my required data, optional data, again, that tell me who's been alerted and help me understand who needs to be alerted to this unfolding incident. So my alert becomes part of my structure. Sensors, absolutely key way to gather information about the environment, and the tools that we've built in the past are even using this format for human sensors to be able to gather field observations. And again, that sensor and observation information gets driven into the XchangeCore tree of knowledge as a form of common operational data. Tasking. What standard operating procedures and tasks are people following? I'm enabled by this kind of a structure to, at any point in my tree of knowledge, look at that and say, what agencies, using what standard operating procedure, what have they completed, what remains to be done, pulling that information out of external applications and being able to provide it into this body of knowledge. Resource management then, this one becomes an emergency data exchange language standard. You see the information that is part of identifying those components, and boom, they become part of the tree of knowledge. And then lastly, the incident action plan collects a number of sources of information out of ICS forms and exposes that into the incident action plan, all of which then become part of this relationship that exists here to help answer the question of what's planned next. So how does this tree turn into a knowledge package? Well, you start out by an incident, always an incident. An incident gets created by an application someplace that is connected into XchangeCore. That incident is then published, as it were, notified to all the other connected applications. And every other component in the content package is connected through that incident, as highlighted there. And what that allows me to do is build this content package as information comes in from a location. I'm able to connect all that different information and make it available through access to XchangeCore. That's how I build that content package. That content package then is announced to people through secure agreements. I want to know who I'm going to give that information to. So we've got two components of security, the exchange agreements, plus our DHS and DoD security certification that gives confidence. Data owners, data receivers, that you know what you're giving up and you know what you're getting. The security comes in through the agreements that enable the exchange between two different XchangeCores. These are on a number of different capacities. One, I can share everything. That's easy to do. I can share by a specific kind of an incident. I can share based on incident proximity. I have a whole bunch of incidents out there, but I only care whether that other XchangeCore entity is within a few miles of it. I can do that. I can have a number of other kinds of data that I can share the information on. And I can manually share. I can have things turned off, and I can go in and say, hey, I want to share this incident right now. So that checkbox form of sharing. All those components add up to being a critical piece of orchestration, because not only do I have the information that I've gathered from a lot of sources, not only have I packaged it up, but in fact I now know who wants it and who is authorized to get it. In the XchangeCore release, there's a brand new agreements console that allows you to very easily go through, make the agreements with another core there, enable the sharing, build a rule around your incident types and proximity. Here we're saying 10 kilometers. I want to be able to share anything that's with a XchangeCore location that's within 10 kilometers. So that component, new and enhanced from XchangeCore, from anything that, if you've seen a Keystone on the military side or usage on the civilian side, new, better ways to refine those agreements. Last component of the 5 major one is synchronization. How do I make absolutely certain that I have the most current data and everybody else has the most current data in order to achieve collaboration? Because if I'm not speaking the same language, if I'm not looking at the same data, I am not going to be able to conduct effective decision making. For that, auto notification of changes comes in the form of establishing a profile that says, hey, this is what I want to be notified about. Simple process. This is only an administrative tool. Any of you end users would never see it. But go in there, pick a name of something. These are my incident management apps. and I'm going to say I'm interested in incidents over there under number 2. If I come over here to number 3, I see that I build this little XML statement there. That's the internal guts of the computer operation. That in that says I'm interested in incidents. Somebody else says, hey, I want to be interested in something else. In number 4 and over on number 5, I'm going to be interested in alerts as well. Very simple process. You do it once. You need to change it. You can go in and change it easily. But it's part of the setup that we help you go through as part of the installation support that the XchangeCore team provides. So synchronization, absolutely critical. All of this leads us to an XchangeCore orchestration life cycle. Begins up in the upper left-hand corner with lots of different data sources, different types, different sources, which XchangeCore lets me translate and transform into common operational data. Common operational data is arrayed on the tree of knowledge, awaiting being composed all the way on the right-hand side into content packages. There you see we've only got 4 of those areas highlighted rather than all of them available. Those content packages are then examine the agreements to determine who's an approved consumer application of that content. And then a notification is sent out to those approved applications saying, hey, we've got content that needs to be synchronized here. It's now available for you. That results in the bottom left-hand corner of an application actually being able to process, visualize, and improve that data. And if you're engaged only in information sharing, this is in a circle. This is a one-way direction. And the receiver looks at it, may process it, might improve it, but doesn't get it back into the cycle. And that concludes it over on the left-hand side. Data is exposed out of that application in its native format again, becoming a data source, just like the originator up on the left-hand side, that takes it through the cycle again. That's where a two-way exchange takes place. I give it up, I get better things back. I give it up, I get better things back. When I'm finished with it, I say, everybody, I'm not using this anymore, and everybody else says, oh, we're not using it anymore either. It's that cycle, really the life cycle that takes place of all the information that's in the tree of knowledge. That's the essence of the really wonderful components that exist inside of XchangeCore that let you, no matter whether you're in a operations center, in a triage location, in dispatch, or any place in between, know that you're going to be able to get information, not just masses of it, but valued information composed into packages that you, through your applications, are able to understand, use, and become part of a collaborative exchange. To conclude, time to get your XchangeCore. Available now. If you go to XchangeCore.org, there's a place in there to register to get XchangeCore, and want a little bit of information about you, the kind of organization that you are. The XchangeCore executable, under arrangement with Department of Homeland Security, is available to emergency response organizations at no cost. So we invite you to join in, pick it up, get it, and begin to experiment. On the right-hand side, you see that there isn't much because XchangeCore is not an end-user application. I want to conclude with that. You use XchangeCore to use your other application. XchangeCore enables geospatial information to be exchanged out. It enables your incident management software. It enables your sensors. It enables all the different components of data that you have to be shared back and forth. It is not any one of those. So what you see is this ugly interface because you, if you're an end user, you will never see it. If you're an IT person, you're going to play with all those things, service reference things on the left-hand side. But XchangeCore sits in the middle, providing that flow of information that allows you to share the information among all those external applications, enabling that to become a key component of how you're going to be able to improve your information management. So get your XchangeCore, XchangeCore.org, and come back. Become more and more part of the XchangeCore community. August 7th, our next one is the value proposition for GIS and how we're using ArcGIS Online as the geospatial repository. The 21st, we talk about the connectors, how to get the code that will allow you to take that one-time application that you've never been able to talk to before and gather its information, put it into XchangeCore so that you can create an information exchange with it. And there are lots of those connectors available out there. The cloud on the September 11th and on the 25th talk more about the community and how we can all get more involved. Then October 8th, introduction of XchangeCore 2.0. This is the one that has all of the significant enhancements that have been made, not just a portion of them coming out of the DoD effort that's taken place. So with that, let me pause and say the microphone is open. Your questions, comments, if you need me to go back to something to reference it, I'm more than happy to. Thoughts on XchangeCore, the detailed look?
So
Jim,
this
this is
is
Dan Anderson, Hennepin County.
Yes, Dan, how about you go first, and then we'll come back to the other person who started. Go ahead, Dan.
Is this, and sorry I haven't been able to check in several months, just now getting back into it due to changes here, positive changes here in Hennepin County. Is XchangeCore replacing usage in the fact that, before it was software on a server at the local level? Does this now replace that, or do we still need that core here locally?
No, this you won't be able to download usage anymore. This is what you download. It's the grandson of usage, I guess I would call it. So, yeah.
So it's something still to be downloaded to be put on a machine by our IT? Yes,
at least that is one way to do it. As mentioned, there are organizations that are providing it on the cloud and will host it for you, so that you don't have to have your IT get involved in it for what they think is reasonable amounts of money. So a number of different ways that you can get it, but yes, someplace you need access to the XchangeCore.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And somebody else?
Yeah, Jim, this is John Black out of Washington County.
Hi, John.
Hey, so one, I applaud it. I've done the DoD, still doing the emergency management here, as well as worked with Homeland Security. So I think this is an absolute necessity, especially that you've got the MATADRR and the DOME approvals and everything else, which is, like you said, excruciatingly pleasant. So that aside, visualizations. So you guys have the ability to connect to large amounts of data. Once everybody says you can see my data, the reciprocity aspect. Are you guys having any developmental group dealing with anything like an Ozone widget framework to Django or something similar, so that we can make sense once we get all this stuff out? Because I don't have the IT support back at home that, even though I could see the data, displaying it so in a relevant fashion, what you called the relevancy of the data is also the relevancy of the information to have meaningful impact into the decision process, whether it's critical, short, compressed, or long-term. Are you guys working on the visualization aspect of this data as well?
No, not as the XchangeCore team. That's
Okay.
something that we leave to the technology providers who are part of the community. We support them, provide that information, but that gets to the kinds of visualization and applications that we want to be enablers of, not replacers of.
Okay. Do you have anybody that you're partnering with currently that's starting to use XchangeCore to at least experiment or explore the conduits and the adapters out of XchangeCore that could be potentially used in different types of frameworks?
Yeah, there are a number of them. We let them talk about themselves, and they've been on many of these calls. But if you shoot me a note, I can give you a couple of references to a couple of good folks out on the West Coast, California, doing some very good work out there. And they've been on some of these calls in the past. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Jim. This is Phil Balin in California. And to the
Hi, Phil. How are you?
I'm good. I just wanted to point out that I think our collaborative group in the Earthquake Clearinghouse is actively looking at how to synthesize and visualize the data. I mean, we've done several exercises with usage, pulled data together, and from what I saw a week or two ago at the capstone presentation at Esri, one thing that they did quite nicely was you're bringing in all kinds of bits and pieces of data now for the first time, and then they synthesize information toward the essential elements of information. And they did so in a county-by-county map look. So what they end up with is, in their case, they had 7 states working together, and they had an essential element like transportation, and simply colorized the county look map in 3 different levels of, red, green, and yellow, or something like that. But the point to me is that they're taking in a lot of information. They're recognizing that the pieces are useful, but also a synthesis of that information, and they seem to be looking towards aggregating it by county in some meaningful way. And that process is something I think that we all need to work on and check in with each other of what makes sense to do that. So it's just a comment.
Yes, appreciate that, Phil. And John, Phil would be one of the people that I was going to point you to. Phil's done some very good work on the visualization and been part of the last 4 or 5 of the big exercises that have been done out in California.
No, and I'd absolutely welcome that. We're running into some of the problems with some of the other stuff I work, where some people view the word spatially, some people view the world in a link analysis diagram, association matrices, histograms, or these type of stuff in order to make sense of their world or the EI that's being asked of them. So the sooner we get to that, this is sort of I see as a tandem or in parallel development effort. I can have all the data in the world that I can touch. If I can't make sense out of it, I'm still sort of stuck.
Yep, exactly right. Anybody else with other questions, comments? No? Then let me wish you all an excellent couple of weeks. We'll reconfigure 2 weeks from now, taking a look at the geospatial components. And important to that, we'll address some of the questions you just described in visualization. So look forward to catching up with all of you, and have a good couple of weeks. Bye now.
Take care. Thank you, Jim.